Hello community, so great that you are back. Yeah, today we look at the topic, hey, is it supervised fine-tuning and reinforcement learning, or is it just reinforcement learning? Hey, and what about we go here from a language model to a vision language model? How much does it change? What is the latest research? Now, in my latest video, I showed you here, does reinforcement learning really incentivize reasoning capacity in LLMs beyond the base model, the pre-trained model? And we find here some real clear answers. But we also looked last week here at some research here from October 2024, Stanford University Department of Statistics and Department of Computer Science to provide us here more information about continued pre-training. We looked at this one here, even from 2020, my goodness. And we looked at the latest here, starting here April 13 by Google DeepMind, how new data permeates here the LLM knowledge and how we can ingest new data and new training methodologies. And what happens if we have outlier? What happens if we have the color of vermilion? And you have seen, hopefully, all my videos. We also looked here at April 17, 2025 at the Princeton University Department of Computer Science, and they identified here the influence of the prior data distribution and the prior knowledge distribution in LLMs, especially if you have your pre-trained model, and how strong is here this prior. We looked at Cornell University, April 16, 2025, updating LLM with new knowledge. We found that direct probing works great for continued pre-trained LLMs, but we completely fail if you have an indirect probing because the information or the data have been fed into the LLMs, but it is not connected to its neural network reasoning. And of course, we had University of California, Berkeley, Allen Institute of AI here, April 16, 2025 here. What LLMs can and cannot solve after supervised fine-tuning. So this was here really on supervised fine-tuning here. Be something beautiful. But this happened just days ago. This happened all in my last week. But I would like to, in this video I showed you here everything about hard level questions, how we have here the performance trend, what we can do to improve our supervised fine-tuning dataset scaling, what about the reasoning difficulties, how we can find new solution. I showed this in my video. And we also had here at Harvard Institute here, April 10, 2025 here, is reinforcement learning post-training, does it really just amplify behavior already learned in the pre-training? Is there nothing else left? And yes, please hold on to your seat because I have to tell you, there's no emergence through reinforcement learning. No artificial intelligence emerges suddenly here from the darkness and says, now I am intelligent. No, it is still a pattern machine that you have to train. So let's open up this video after just a short recap here of last week. What is it? It is a comment of you. And one of you said, hey, you don't show us all the studies on artificial intelligence. And you know what? You are absolutely correct. That's impossible. I read the technical abstract close to 100 studies per day. And in detail, I scan about 5 to 10, and I read minimum 2. So I can't show you all studies here on my YouTube channel. That's simply impossible. But then 2 of you asked me here, particularly after my last week here, hey, what about this paper here? No? April 10, so this is already from more than a week old. And this here is from University of Texas at Dallas. So our friends in the US here say, hey, what about this? This is really also really interesting. Why have you not shown us this study? Now this is very easy to answer. Because I looked at it, I even read it, it was in my closer circle that I said, maybe I want to show you this. And then I decided, no, I feel there's not really the data there. It did not convince me. And therefore, if I want to provide you value on this channel, I went with another research paper that I felt more convinced, strong evidence. But you are right. If you say, hey, let's have a look at this. So, 2 main statements, you see it here. I just put it out here. Supervised fine-tuning helps our models to learn reasoning formats. It often locks aligned models into an imitative, rigid reasoning mode that impedes further learning. So, supervised fine-tuning is not great at all to help here the model in its reasoning process. And regarding reinforcement learning, they looked here at GRPO they developed here a novel mixed reward model with 4 or 5 additional components here from format and whatever reward structure, integrating now both the perception and the cognition signals and everything. And they say, hey, our reinforcement learning approach here fosters here a more genuine adaptive reasoning behavior. Let's have a look at this. So, we know what we need. We need a spark of genius. So what do you have? What is really interesting, what fascinated me personally, is now a vision language model. But they did it here with a frozen visual encoder, which makes sense because the reasoning analysis, the reasoning evaluation is not easy. And even with a frozen visual encoder, you will have your problems doing all the supervised fine-tuning and reinforcement learning. And if you would open up all the floodgates, the complexity might really increase and might not be that easy. But so let's come to here. The first is to summarize here. The authors tell us here from the University of Texas at Dallas, while supervised fine-tuning helps unaligned models, so not reinforcement learning at all, not aligned models, follow here the instruction set, it limits the exploration during reinforcement learning by promoting imitative reasoning. So they tell us, hey, supervised fine-tuning, it limits the exploration during the reinforcement learning. And you know, we always have this delicate balance between exploration and exploitation. Can we have a flashlight and we have a dark room and we look with the flashlight at different spots in this dark room? We explore every corner, or exploitation. We have already found one interesting object in the depth of the room. So we have now to focus our light beam here on this object from different angles. Exploration, exploitation, and they tell us supervised fine-tuning is not that good. And they say, while prior work suggested supervised fine-tune followed by reinforcement learning, so the classical SFT plus RL, it offers here the best of both worlds. We find that applying supervised fine-tuning before GRPO, you know, the group relative policy optimization, hurts the performance. Now, this is quite interesting and it's a little bit unusual. But therefore, I was interested, and this was the reason why I read the paper. Now, it is interesting. If you do supervised fine-tuning, you need a training data set. And they were absolutely precise. And it is a beautiful study. Don't get me wrong. But this study is now more than 10 days old. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, data set. So they said, okay, beautiful. So we have here a lot of data. And they have images, vision language model here with frozen visual encoder. And they have a detailed caption of what is the content of this. And then you have an assistant and you have a question by the user. So we have a lot of training data. So let's prepare this now for a training data set. So what they did, they asked DeepSeek R1 to prepare here, or look at, generate answers with chain of thought. And then you have from a reasoning model, the typical reasoning chains here. Okay, let's tackle this question the user wants me to do. Yes, and based on the caption and my analysis. And you see suddenly we have here, maybe if we go a little bit closer, can I show you this? Yes, here. We have here caption, but you don't want this, no? Because your model will have an image. So they used a rewriter to exchange some technical terms of reference here. So instead of caption, they have now the image, and you understand what's happening. But otherwise, it should be more or less the same, because this is the intelligence. This is what you wanted here, no? To have here really the answer with a chain of thought reasoning. And then you have to rewrite, and then you rewrite it again. Because, yeah, you want to make here sure that it has a ground truth answer, and then you can generate 2 training data sets. Supervised fine-tune and reinforcement learning. This is what they tackled, and so they generated their training data. And they called it here a particular VLAA thinking training data set, great. And they have here all this, if you want, existing training data set. They collected now from distilling here all 1 answers from those. And they have here then collected here from lava, chain of thought and everything. So they used a lot of data, but they came up in the end here with 2 new training data sets. final supervised fine-tuning training data set and a reinforcement learning one. Great. So you see, final SFT, these are the 126K training data that I will reference. Now you know what we are talking about. Now, as I told you, we have to rewrite now and optimize here. So interestingly now, they choose here, and I have here in quotation, the raw reasoning answers generated by R1 are passed through a rewriting module, and they use GPT 3.5 in our experiments. And this removes unnecessary phrases, references to caption, as I showed you, and ensures the answers adheres to clean instruction following format on the image. So they had to correct something. Now, if you rewrite an R1 reasoning trace with a GPT 3.5, reading this, I had my question marks, because if you correct supervised fine-tuning training data that have to have a certain complexity, and you correct those linguistic semantics here with a 6-year-old LLM, I had a question. Hey, is it possible that we lose some information? Is it possible that a little bit of the reasoning trace is simply not there because GPT 3.5 was simply not able to understand the complexity of the reasoning traces? And you get an idea. Let's look here at the facts. I think this is very interesting. Another thought why I didn't show you this, I want to show you here. So we have an R1 is 671 billion free trainable parameter, beautiful large language model for reasoning. Great. So they extracted now the reasoning traces from a reasoning model. You remember? Test time, compute scaling, and everything. So you do have in those traces, you remember, hey, now I have to think at this. Maybe I should start with a different alternative approach, or let me verify this. You have all those reasoning phrases, no? And then you rewrite all of this with GPT 3.5. Now, I don't know how GPT 3.5 writes this. I have not used this for, 4 or 5 years. But this is interesting, no? Because we get something new out of this GPT 3.5. And then, interestingly, they decided they want now to further process this data, this training data. And they said, we used here 2 different vision language models to compute here the perplexity score of each answer and sort the samples here over 2 modules. And we keep the sample with a high because we want to have those harder examples, not to push the models here to learn more effectively and more efficiently, this harder example, harder to solve traces. And I understand this. But I don't understand at the time reading this why you use a 2 billion free trainable parameter model. I mean, just to tell you, we come from the complexity of a 671B model, yeah, with complete reasoning traces. We rewrite it with a GPT 3.5, and now we squeeze it to a computation of a perplexity of a 2B vision language model. And you see why I did not present you this paper at the time. But let's go on. And then, of course, they decided, okay, we have now the data, some data, 25K. And now we do a supervised fine-tuning, SFT, of a non-reasoning model on this R1 generated reasoning traces. Again, I felt there's something, the coherence is missing here in this training setup. And they decided to go for a particular model, and at least it was a 2.5 Q one, no, not the 2 one. A vision language model, but then they went with a 3B model. Now let me tell you, I understand why our colleagues here in Texas did this. It is very expensive to have a supervised fine-tuning in RL if you have a 7B or 32B model. Of course, much more parameter to train. But if you want to go and have a statement about, in general, about supervised fine-tuning and reinforcement learning for AI models, and you go with one 3B model, as in this case for the testing, and I'll show you the data in a second, I would not go below a 32B model if you want to go for complex reasoning traces from R1. So they went here, and I said maybe for cost reasons or whatever reason was, it's simpler to do here a vision language model in 3B. So you guessed what I felt at this moment. In addition, they said, our QN to be, referred here to the instruction-tuned version. Now, what they could not know, because this was published a week later, and I showed you this already in my last video, if we look at the performance here, and we have a posit K metric, look, in my last video I showed you this. The base model here in green has this performance here. 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, and here the number of samples for posit K. If we use now the instruction, the blue one, the performance drops because we train now here the model on specific instruction behavior. And maybe this is not as general if you run an AIM24 test for the mathematical reasoning. So if you train now on specific instruction, of course, the general capability of the model here in green, the base model, can be reduced. And then, just to show you here, reinforcement learning is here, and you see, in my last video, they all converge at a higher number of samples. So if we have the same question 256 times asked, you can say that even the base model outperforms here the reinforcement learning model simply because the reasoning is already in the base model. They did not know this. Texas had no idea that this will be published a week later. So what they did, they only looked at one particular case in a complete study only at k equal 1. And I absolutely understand this. At the time, I would have done the same a week ago. They had no access to the new research here by our friends in Tsinghua University. But now look here at the data points. They have a complete different dynamics. And now to write a study and claim that this single data point at only at k equal 1, you can deduct now a general statement about supervised fine-tuning and reinforcement learning. You understand now why I decided not to show you this. All those came together. Because, in one of my last videos I showed you, if you're only at k equal 1, what you do with reinforcement learning, you only enhance the sampling efficiency. It tells you nothing about the complexity of the reasoning that is still there in your model. Even you go with a moderate k, we were talking here, k reaches here the tens, the beginning of the 100s, then you see that the diminishing advantage here for reinforcement learning models, the base model becomes equally performant in the complex reasoning task. And of course, here in this video, here one of my last videos I showed you, the base model even surpasses here the reinforced learning model if you have a high enough k. More than here, 128. So they here, April 10, had no idea. Let's make this clear. This is nothing wrong. But they had no idea what 8 or 10 days later will be published. So therefore, they built their idea, their analysis, their complete conclusion about supervised fine-tuning and reinforcement learning on only k equal 1. And then they give us the data. Now, let's be clear. Those are here original screenshot from their study. Beautiful. Supervised fine-tune. No? We go for the first one. And they say, look, the Q1 2.5, the 3 billion vision language model, has a particular performance here. 31. Never mind. If we do then supervised fine-tuning, SFT on different sizes of the data, and you have 55K or 25K or 126K training data set size, they say, now if we impose here this supervised fine-tuning training data that we generated here on this model, the performance goes down. And they say here, so from 6 reasoning benchmark, we have here the result. More supervised fine-tuning data hurt the vision language model performance. But do you remember how they generated the supervised fine-tuning training data of a non-reasoning vision language model trained on reasoning traces, on reasoning data and compressed with GPT 3.5 and 2B model evaluation? Now, you see, if I look at this, and I really built this just for this video so you can see what I felt when I read the study, is it really amazing that you say, look, after I take this training data and I squeezed it in a 3B, then this 3B after the training has now a reduced performance after the supervised fine-tuning on this new training data? I mean, if you've seen my last video, you immediately understand that this is incompatible with the pre-trained data and the pre-trained knowledge of a 3B model. Because guess what? Just think about the complexity level of an R1. Just let's assume it is an 8 out of 10. And then we have here a vision language model, vision plus language in 3B. So guess what is the reasoning complexity of this model? What it has been pre-trained on? I would say maybe a 1 out of 10, max a 2 out of 10. And now you are amazed that if you tune this model with a complexity of this, that the model is not able to do it. Imagine I'm this model, yeah? I'm here, a theoretical physicist, and I have a friend somewhere, a professor in Harvard, a colleague, and he tells me, you know what, he's an economist. And he is currently working, I don't know, at about the economic effects on the trade, on the world trade, if you impose tariffs. And he said, you know what, I have a team of 6 beautiful genius PhD students, and we developed a complete new financial theory on trade optimization and bond market and future markets and I don't know what. And I give you here now my reasoning traces. I'm a complete different domain-specific expert. I have no idea about economy. He, the R1 model, can give me the complete reasoning traces. I will not be able to understand it. What is now this new financial theory or economic theory that he tries to explain to me? I will fail. And now guess what? The result of the paper was the QN 2.5 Vision Language 3B also has a reduced performance if trained on this new data. You can input the data into the vision language model. You can hope that if you have a direct probing, the LLM will, the vision language model, will find this new data in a vector space, in a tensor space. And even you could extract the data, but for sure the data are not interwoven into the neural network. It is not able to make the neural network connection, the reasoning connection that are necessary to really, I don't know how to say this, allocate here the reasoning traces to all of the other reasoning traces that already exist here in the pre-trained model. So how should this model be able to follow the instruction of this model? So this is what I felt at the time reading this. So let's go back now to this original study, and this is a beautiful study, don't get me wrong. And they tell us, these findings highlight the limitation of supervised fine-tuning as a tool for enhancing the multimodal reasoning. And somehow at the time, I did not really agree with this. I felt different. It's a feeling, you know? And then they say, rather than simply scaling supervision data, our results suggest a shift towards more advanced training methods like reinforcement learning. You remember 10 days ago, everybody thought about, hey, yeah, supervised fine-tuning plus reinforcement learning. And we all read the paper here from DeepSeek where I said, hey, only reinforcement learning for the big model and supervised fine-tuning and reinforcement learning for the smaller models. So 10, 11 days ago, this was the trend. And they absolutely followed here the trend, you know. But for me, 2 days ago, they published this, and this shows us clearly it was wrong. Because they exactly focused on this particular question alone. Reinforcement learning, LLM, reasoning capabilities. And they told us, reinforcement learning here for verifiable reward system that are in a binary reward system does not elicit novel reasoning abilities beyond the base model, the pre-trained model. It improves only the sampling efficiency, and it even has a negative effect. Reinforcement learning for verifiable rewards narrows the reasoning boundaries. It reduces here the available solution space. So you see, if you say, why don't you show us everything? I select papers I want to show you based on what I think about the content, how I evaluate here the science of the paper, and how I think that I want to provide value to you. I can't show you all the paper. But let's say at the main statement that you would see if you would have not read the paper. No? There's one statement that if you say, hey, AI, summarize this, you will get this back because this is a headline. No? Supervised fine-tuning is not compatible with GRPO in multimodal reasoning. I think this is, in its completeness, a wrong statement. No? Because in my words, if you have a language model, a vision or not, that was supervised fine-tuning on some incompatible supervised fine-tuning training data in relation now to the pre-trained data and the knowledge of the pre-trained model, it will underperform even with a later reinforcement learning alignment. Because, of course, in the supervised fine-tuning, so much goes wrong in the way you do it that even if afterwards you try to correct with a reinforcement learning, you cannot really fully recover from this. So I did not agree with this statement. Let's come to the conclusion. In the conclusion, there were 2 points that I did not really felt at the time. The first one, distilling reasoning data and performance supervised fine-tuning is a deficient way to transfer reasoning abilities. And I thought, I don't think so. And I know for sure that in the, if you want, language model, this is not the case. You know why? Because 10 days later, we got this data experiment here. Look, black are the distilled version. They outperform the reinforcement, the base, and the instruction-tuned version. So saying that distilled reasoning data and performance supervised fine-tuning is a deficient way, 10 days later it was clear, no, this is not the correct statement. Now if you say across modality with a frozen vision encoder, this would be a very interesting discussion if you do not do this anymore in a frozen state and a dynamic state, but let's stay here with this article. The second one was that reasoning is a native emerging ability acquired from reinforcement learning. And I do not agree with that statement because, as you see, 1 week later, we had a complete publication that told us this is factually an incorrect interpretation of the data. No, nothing against the team in Texas, but they had not the data. 10 days, 8 days later, this was published, so they had no access to this. They could not understand that they were only at a scenario where we have on our posit k equal 1. And if you only focus at equal 1, then maybe this would be the impression you get. But if you, like here in this publication by Tsinghua University, you go to a higher case, you see a complete different training dynamic of the system. So only the statement in its general form, reasoning is a native emerging ability acquired from reinforcement learning, and this will an AI summarization give back to you as the main conclusion. And you might think this is a correct statement. Yes, maybe it is an incorrect interpretation at the time, given the data that they had, and now that we have a week later new data, we can say, I'm not sure that this is correct. But let me be clear, reinforcement learning is beautiful, and reinforcement learning done right is powerful. But what it can and cannot teach is conditioned here by the richness of the reward signal. If we go here with policy optimization and reward model, and maybe you even decide to go with a value model, it is conditioned by the strength of the starting prior, you see, the pre-trained model, on what complexity a model has been pre-trained, and the metric used to judge the new capability. Because you saw Texas, they only looked at k equal 1 and neglected all the other cases. So it depends so much on the parameter of your system. And then to come up with a general statement about general supervised fine-tuning and general reinforcement learning. And you might read this in your AI summarization and think this is a correct statement and a general correct statement. And no, it was only valid for k equal 1. Because it only evaluated, if you want to be more specific, only a sampling efficiency in this case, but not a reasoning capability. But this insight was published 8 days later. So Texas had no idea that this new publication, this new insight, this new understanding of the inner working would be published in about a week. So careful. It is really important that if you read a paper, believe whatever you know. Trust in your judgment. But if you want to understand my reasoning here for this particular case here, I explained it here in detail, I think half an hour in this video. Okay, so therefore, summary. It is so important to really understand at what particular part in the training you're looking at. No? We have the pre-training of our LLM, VLM, whatever you have. Then my last videos focus here on continuous pre-training here to add new knowledge here, domain-specific knowledge. If you want to build a Met AI, you do this here with continuous pre-training. Then if you really have to use supervised fine-tuning, you do it to train on a downstream task, like the good old saying. You have here a fine-tuned, makes the model more skilled at specific task, but you need the knowledge here from the pre-training or continuous pre-training because this task might need the knowledge to perform the task. And whatever you do in reinforcement learning, whatever policy optimization you choose, it is so sensitive. It is so difficult to judge here a general statement. But I think the alignment regarding the behavior of the model is my fallback solution that always works with me if I want to understand this. And then, if we have done this at training time, then we can talk about reasoning model, inference reasoning. Then we can talk about test time compute scaling models, where we go and run these models 2, 5, 10 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours. You see? So the more you know, the more you understand about the details, the simpler it is for you to understand even complex publications, and you can find the truth for a particular day in the week, because I can tell you, maybe next week we will encounter complete new knowledge. And yeah, if you subscribe, you can be sure, if it's interesting, you will find here a video on my channel.